Welcome to episode 13 of the Sustainable Tech Partner Podcast, hosted by Joe Panettiere. Today's guest is Vijay Sankaran, Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of Johnson Controls. We discuss the smart buildings of the future and the various technologies that will improve the sustainability and energy efficiency of such buildings. Vijay, great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Hey, I appreciate you carving out some time. Hey, just a little bit of background. Where are you physically based, by the way?
I am based in the beautiful city of Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Okay. Now, born and raised there or relocated there?
No, I'm actually originally from the New Jersey area, like out by your neck of the woods there, on the East Coast. So I born and brought up in northern New Jersey and spent some time in Boston and North Carolina and ended up in Michigan through marriage.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I got to come out and visit you sometime. I've been to visit Michigan a few times, but it's been a while. Now,
Well, we're really enjoying the football climate here recently, so that's what we're excited about.
let's rewind a little bit. Now, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you joined Johnson Controls around May of 2021. Do I have the date right? And what attracted you to the business?
Well, yeah, you did. I did join in May of 2021, and what really intrigued me about the opportunity is the whole premise of applying technology and AI and data to solving global problems around sustainability and climate change. So, I had been in financial services and, just leveraging data, AI, and analytics to solve all kinds of problems and opportunities for self-directed investors. And I've always been really passionate about being green and sustainability and climate change. And as I read Bill Gates's book on climate change and how buildings contribute 40% of global carbon emissions, I said, what better of a way for me to really apply my technology and data and AI leadership to a space that I could really make an impact around climate change. And when our chief digital officer at the time told me about OpenBlue and what we were trying to do with OpenBlue, and it was really just in its infancy, I said, what a great opportunity for me to work in a startup kind of environment within a large industrial company and really transform it to being a leader around digital software that's really driving sustainable decarbonization. That was a pretty cool opportunity as I sort of processed it.
And what I want to do is maybe take a few steps back and first see the bigger picture and then do a drill down into what Johnson Controls is actually doing here. But the bigger picture, you've been out there talking about the smart building of the future. What does that building look like and how real is that building today?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, completely embracing all aspects of the smart building of the future, is, a real idealized, perspective of, what buildings could look like, right? And I mean, there are millions of buildings out there, of all shapes, flavors, and forms. There are newer builds, there are retrofits, there are strip malls, there are shopping malls, there are stadiums. And so you see buildings in every shape, size, and flavor on a global basis. And so, the smart building of the future really puts the occupant at the center of, the experience. And how does, the building really interact in real time and live and breathe and evolve in response to the way that it's being occupied, the external surroundings around where it's situated in the world, what the climate is in that particular part of the world at the time, right? Because most buildings just are very static in the sense that, you open a building, you construct it, people are in the building, you have static set points around things like humidity and climate and things like that, the elevators work and so on and so forth, but there's no real smartness to it per se, right? And I think what we've really believed from a point of view standpoint is that, by adding smartness to the building, you can do so much more. You can significantly improve the employee experience. So some examples in that particular vector is using your cell phone for access into the building, right? So like we all carry these badges around if you work in a corporate building and you have to scan in. Well, the world is really around this now, so why not just swipe in? Or even, do you even need this? Can you just use facial identification and say, camera just notices that it's VJ walking into a building and the turnstile automatically opens, right? So that's a big characteristic of smartness. Or, if you're at your desk, you're having a particularly busy day, that you can actually order directly from your cafeteria and have food dropped off at your desk, like a kind of like a personal Uber Eats inside the building, right? That's another aspect of smartness. There's a whole aspect around employee experience. And, I think as employees are much more hybrid in the way that they work and are working, coming into dynamic spaces, really tailoring that overall employee experience, everything where they're sitting to, where what services that they need is incredibly important in the smart building context. Number two is, how is that space being used? I think what companies are coming to the realization is that they own a lot of real estate, and they're questioning whether or not they actually need that much real estate, just given the patterns by which people are now working. And so, but I don't really know how those buildings are being used. What are their utilization patterns? How can I basically consolidate? Maybe there are two offices next to each other. Can I oversubscribe them, and so on and so forth? And so the other thing that we really drive for from a smart building is knowledge about how the building is actually being used. So where are people sitting in the building? Who's using which conference rooms? And we have an array of sensors that we integrate with. And we recently made an acquisition of a company called FM Systems out of Raleigh, North Carolina, that specializes in really understanding, how spaces are being utilized, both from an asset standpoint and utilization standpoint. The third aspect of the smart building is really around optimization. And so, once you know how these buildings are being utilized, then what? Can I change the temperature control? Can I forecast based upon upcoming weather events, whether I need to turn down the temperature, turn up the temperature? Where are there faults in this living building, right? I mean, if you draw the analogy of our house, there may be a leak somewhere, but you don't really know where the leak is. In a smart building, you understand that because suddenly, through the data that's coming in your building automation system, some pressure has dropped somewhere, and then you're bringing that data up into the cloud, and you're using AI, based upon some predictive variables to know, okay, this pressure has dropped, and this particular piece of equipment is connected to these other pipes and things like that, and we think that there's a leak, right? And so as part of that, we developed this blueprint called the digital twin of the building, which is a digital virtual representation of how that building works. Also a key attribute, in terms of the smart building, right? And then it's just, really understanding how the equipment in the building, actually is working. Do you have your chillers in the building connected? Do you have all of your HVAC equipment connected? Do you have your security cameras connected? Are they all working, right? So it's this style of an integrated, command center. But I think fundamentally, it's all about the data at the end of the day. That's what really makes the building smart, because you're constantly looking at all of these, inputs, whether it's employees coming into the building, or whether it's, data that's gathered from sensors, or faults that come from machines in the building, the external temperature, third-party data that you might want to feed in, and then you bring that all into an integrated data and analytics environment, and then you apply AI and ML on around it, and then now with generative AI, you summarize that and you tell your customers, okay, here are the 3 recommendations that you need to take on to make your building more efficient. And if you just press yes, you have that closed loop back to the internal systems in the building that it can actually execute those changes. So it's that overall, connectedness, data, AI, and that closed loop nature, all powered by an integrated data lake and a digital twin, that ultimately, makes a building smart. And so if you followed like autonomous vehicles, like and you have level 1 through level 5, autonomy, I probably just described level 5 autonomy. Where are most people at? They're probably, the most progressive buildings are probably at a level 3, and we see some examples of that in the Middle East, and some are up and coming here in the United States. But those are mostly on new constructions. On retrofits, we see mostly level 2, level 3 aspirations.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So let me sometimes I oversimplify things, and I'll give you a little bit of background on me. So I came more from the IT market as a journalist. So first in the corporate and enterprise sector, but then down in small and mid-sized business and managed service providers, right? So that's the world I'm most familiar with. But then you have this HVAC world, and you've got the facilities management world, and as I think about all these things and the picture you've painted, you've got to, as either the customer here or the partner, you first you got to gather all the data, right? So to gather all that data, do you see the worlds of HVAC and IT systems coming together through cloud, Excel, et cetera, is part one of the question. So there's the gathering, and then there's the management of all that data, where I guess you guys really have some secret sauce here. And then there's the, okay, now that I'm managing the data, now I have to actually act on the data and make informed decisions on the data. Am I describing the situation correctly? And is OpenBlue really a solution for all that overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think you described exactly, a large part of what OpenBlue does at the end of the day, right?
Okay.
And so I think number one, gathering the data at the edge, from a diverse set of devices is complicated to begin with. And so one of the things that we've really focused on over the years to having leadership, in terms of connecting at the edge. And we have a platform, an edge platform called our OpenBlue Bridge, which we is based upon an acquisition we did a couple of years ago of a company, edge AI company called Foghorn Systems in California, that actually connects to a whole bunch of different devices on the edge, streamlines it, and then can send it up to the cloud. So like I call it connect, collect, and analyze is really the simple framework,
Okay.
So then you connect it, collect it, standardize it, send it up to the cloud, analyze it, and then offer actions that can be executed in that kind of closed loop process.
Got it. Okay. So, and when we opened the conversation, we were talking about various stages of AI have been around for quite some time, right? And then we get to, I guess it was the November 2023 timeframe, give or take, when Gen AI certainly, sort of burst onto the scene. Has your strategy evolved, or has the opportunity evolved dramatically since the conversation extended from AI to generative AI?
I think, generative AI is an extremely powerful capability that, has been developed here over the last 5 years, right? And I think where that really brings us into is sort of the age of the AI application. And so, if you went back sort of circa 1998, 1999, right before the dot-com era sort of, emerged, and we eventually got to mobile apps, right? The first layer was just basic like internet connectivity and web pages and things like that, right? And then as you move towards circa 2001, 2002, you had more e-commerce applications that were basically using the content that was on the web and then being able to drive transactional based applications on top of that. The same thing is happening in the AI space right now, which is initially you started off with simple predictive models, and then you went to deep learning, where you had different kinds of like language classification, and now you've added generative AI on top of that. And so the question now is like, okay, as we get more and more building blocks, right, how do we assemble these things into AI applications, right? And so I'll give you a perfect example that, we're working on with our Net Zero Advisor generative AI product, right? And so number one, we get utility bill information, from our customers, okay? And that utility bill information talks, shows energy usage trends and things like that. We have regulations like local law 97 in your backyard in New York City, that has a whole bunch of things around, what you should be doing and shouldn't be doing from an emission standpoint. All right. Nobody wants to look through all of those things. So the AI application is now, okay, how do we take, the usage data, maybe run a predictive model on that to understand, what the patterns look like, and then how that's going to trend, and then take that and actually use it as a prompt, to feed it against, these documents that are local laws, and then use the power of generative AI to spit out summarized responses that tell, your customers, okay, you are either in compliance with, this law or not, and here's where you might have gaps, and then here's what you do, right? So it's actually like a multi-stage process. What I think has been the real gift from a corporate perspective of generative AI is really the summarization capabilities of taking, your own internal documents, local laws and things like that, and being able to apply a data set against that, and being able to sort of generate this summarized view of, almost like a summarized report and a set of actions against that, that learning model.
Got it. Got it. So some naive questions for you. All right. So as you mentioned, I'm in New York, and there are certain regulations here for the building sector. Seattle has certain regulations either on the scene or coming onto the scene. Boston, similar. Then you go to Europe and the UK, and there's a whole set of regulations over there. So do you think we'll be seeing sort of these net zero AI assistants, co-pilots, so to speak, where you're able to run models off of each one of those regions and really customize the output? How do you think this works on a region by region basis over time?
Yeah, so I think you summarized where I think the world is going in this space, and I know that some of our competitors have launched uh, co-pilots already, and we're in the process of launching our own co-pilot in a similar sort of pattern. But I think what stays the same across all regions is the data. Okay, so like everybody has buildings, everybody has equipment inside that data. That equipment, generates faults, it generates energy emissions. You have utility bills, you have weather forecasts, you have other integrated data. Okay, so the data is the same. What changes from region to region is the local laws and regulations, or EU regulations, or things like that. And so that's where, at the end of the day, generative AI becomes really useful, because you gathered the data, and then you can basically bounce that off against the local law, based upon generative AI using a pattern that you may have heard of, which is the RAG pattern, retrieval augmentative generation, which basically you can take all of the documents associated with regulations and vectorize it, and then basically say, okay, this data is coming from Luxembourg, right? So using a vector DB, saying, okay, what's all of the data that is representative of Luxembourg, and then that spits out a vector for you, and then you bounce that data off the that vector, and then at the LLM, GPT-4 or GPT-3.5, we tend to be focused right now on GPT-4 because the summarization capabilities are superior, but then you just basically, you're saying you're bouncing off your data against the local vector content, and then the LLM does the matching, GPT does the matching, and then basically gives you a summarized set of responses.
Okay, so you've covered a lot of ground here in terms of where smart buildings are going and how AI could play a role in that. Let me play devil's advocate. Say I'm a commercial real estate owner who is, some of them may be feeling overwhelmed by this conversation, both on the tech side, but also on the cost side. And sometimes when regulations come along, they view that as red tape, they view it as costly. Can we take it from sort of the concern side and swing it over to the opportunity side for our viewers and listeners here? There is return on investment, potentially cost savings, new revenue opportunities. How do you present this conversation to those who are worried about the cost of all this and bring it over to a revenue opportunity or a cost savings opportunity type conversation for them?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Joe. And that's a question that we get asked by our customers all the time. Okay. And, you know, we have, a value proposition with OpenBlue that is oriented around, safe, healthy, and sustainable. Okay. That's kind of the value proposition that, and so I'll start with sustainable because that's, a primary focus of what we're talking about. But at the root cause of it, what is sustainability, right? Sustainability is about two things. One, it's about energy efficiency, and two, it's about net zero, and being able to decarbonize, right? And so the lack of decarbonization in some parts of the world are now leading to penalties and fines and potentially additional costs, to buy carbon credits and things like that. So if you can do that just through software, right, and be able to mitigate, your carbon output, thereby reducing the need to buy carbon credits, and the cost of the software and the capabilities around that justify the value that gets created, right? Then that's kind of a no-brainer business case, right? Number two, in some parts of the world where decarbonization is not yet, as much of a priority, let's say, kind of in a lot of the Asia market, India as an example, where it's a priority, but it's not the primary priority. But energy efficiency is a huge priority. And so, everything that we're doing here is absolutely intrinsically aligned to driving energy efficiency. And so one of the things that we have in the tools is ROI calculators, so basically, or energy conservation measures, and you can actually go in and do what if scenarios around, okay, if I did this, if I did that, if I took this action, what's going to be the ROI that's generated? So a lot of our commercial real estate owners, and we're working with a large commercial real estate REIT based in the UK, they're actually like renting out the building to other lessors, right? And they have to put a business model together where they're actually bringing the cost of the OpenBlue software into the business model, right? And so on a building by building basis, they're saying, okay, what's our ROI, on by using OpenBlue? What are my actions am I able to take, and what's reducing my energy consumption that more than offsets the investment that I need to make in OpenBlue, right?
Mhm.
And what I'll say is that based upon our analyses across a portfolio of buildings, unless it's like an ultra modern, ultra new, ultra efficient building, you're looking at 10 to 20%, energy efficiency savings across most of your customers. And so, it, in that standpoint, it's very virtuous, to adopt something like OpenBlue just because there's such value in that.
Absolutely.
And
So,
the same goes true for safety and healthy buildings too. Like you know, think about the fact that you're now running these portfolios of real estate, and you don't want to have a security center in each of your buildings. But if you have all of your cameras connected into sort of an integrated command center, you have a digital twin that tells you like what's going on in the building, where there might have been failures in that. I mean, that's actually an OpEx efficiency for a lot of people that own a portfolio of properties, because now you can have a centralized SOC and a command, catch and dispatch across your buildings portfolio rather than having one in each facility, right? And then the same thing is true on healthy buildings. I mean, especially with clean air now having been demonstrated as something that improves the productivity of your employees and something that employees are demanding. And especially when you get into spaces like hospitals, for example, right, and needing to have like certain air standards, OpenBlue actually, will work with healthcare institutions to maintain high indoor air quality standards that are required for things like surgery and mitigation of, disease diffusion. In fact, we work with MIT to build an optimization model that actually can increase ventilation based upon how many people are in a space to reduce the dissemination of pathogens across that space. And so, like, really being able to create more of a healthy space. And so when you look at those value propositions that are coming out of OpenBlue, I think it's pretty powerful, and it kind of sells itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting as you were sharing each one of those examples. I was picturing a table with seats with various partner types in each seat. So you got facilities management in one seat. You've got the IT department in another seat. You've got building security in a seat. You've got the outsourced MSP in a seat. Do you see OpenBlue as sort of a single pane of glass for all those types of partners to begin managing across because like for instance, like physical security sometimes is one type of partner that's managing that. But then the
Yep.
IT infrastructure, PCs, servers, printers, et cetera, is an MSP managing that. Do you see an opportunity here where there's a one dashboard so that all types of partners can see a complete view of what's going on here?
That's really what we're driving with OpenBlue. So it's modular. Okay, so I mean, at the end of the day, depending upon what your basic problem is and where you want a solution, right? I mean, we can add on different modules, right? And
Right.
so we have a single pane of glass, and based upon what modules and what your persona is, you can actually customize that, that entry dashboard to saying, okay, here's what I'm focused on for energy and sustainability. So if you have a persona that I'm a chief sustainability officer, or a sustainability analyst, you get a certain dashboard around energy consumption and net zero output and energy conservation measures, right? If I'm a facility manager, it's all about assets and faults and things like that. So you get a dashboard, like that, right? So what we find is that when we've done, in our UX design, an extensive amount of focus groups with different personas, some who use OpenBlue and some who don't use OpenBlue, and really what sort of the modern incarnation of these sort of building software applications really needs to be is much more persona and consumer experience driven, user experiences, right? Because and they want it really that me personalized kind of an interface. So it's a platform, it's very modular, and it's very much tailored based upon the persona that you are. And there are very few people who want security, facilities, and sustainability in one pane of glass. That's not very, typical of a persona that exists across the buildings ecosystem.
Got it. Okay. So if I'm a potential partner listening to this, I understand the end customer use case and the business drivers for the end customer here. And frankly, I understand the partner use cases as well. I'm just trying to understand the partner model. So if I'm a potential partner listening to this, do I resell this in and put it in for the end customer and then wash my hands of it and walk away? Or am I ongoing managed service provider? Or am I sort of a hybrid? Maybe I'm doing some resell, some managed services, but ultimately you're managing it for the end customer. What are the partner types that you're seeing coming to the table here?
I mean, I think the examples that you give is all of the above, right?
Right.
So number one, I mean, if you take a step back and you fundamentally look at what Johnson Controls is, I mean, we're a building solution company, and so we sell, traditional services, software solutions, and products to support, buildings at the end of the day. And so we have partners who, want to go in and do large integration projects. Think the Accentures, the KPMGs, those kinds of partners, right? They have a smart building, program, or a smart campus program, or a sustainability program, right? But they don't
Yep.
sell equipment, and they don't sell additional managed services to manage the buildings, right? That's not their core competency. So in those particular scenarios, we'll partner with somebody like that, and Accenture's, an OpenBlue certified partner, and we'll say, okay, we'll bring to the table the software and the services to support that particular customer engagement. That's one model. Another model, and this often happens, on a regional basis, is that there is a local partner that wants to provide that ongoing managed service and coordinate, all the repairs that need to happen in the buildings and things like that, right? In that case, we'll just provide the software with OpenBlue, and they'll install it, configure it, and they're trained and certified in order to do that. That's another model, right? And then you can see every single kind of variant of that model coming together, right? We have a large indirect channel for our equipment, and they may just want to have visibility into all of their customers, and where there have been failures across those particular customers in HVAC equipment, and that's another model. So we've tried to keep ourselves flexible in terms of where do we bring kind of the core differentiating capabilities, right? And I think where we're especially strong is in terms of connecting the building through software, and bringing that data to a centralized cloud, and being able to provide different kinds of outcomes on top of that. And like I said, we have a thriving services and product business that can complement that, or you can just use that platform to do it, create opportunity for that particular partner.
Fantastic. Well, tell you what, you've covered a lot of ground for us, and there may be some listeners and viewers who haven't quite kicked the tires on all this yet. For those who are looking to learn some more or get started on this journey, where should they go? Is there a particular website or URL that they should reach out to?
Yeah, so we have a section on our Johnson Controls website. We'll provide that link for OpenBlue. And OpenBlue is our software platform for smart buildings software. And so I think that's a good place to start. Where we see a lot of customers, in their entry point, is our Net Zero Advisor module, which doesn't require a connection on the edge, but it's something that you can go in, get your utility bills ingested. It's a lower entry point, and then you just basically get insights into how is my building performing from an energy and carbon emission perspective, right? And that oftentimes basically spurs a lot of new ideas for customers around, if I had it connected to this equipment, I could generate these kinds of energy efficient savings. So that's typically how we've seen sort of the entry path for our customers. And so there's a wealth of information on that site, and I think that it's a great entry point for people who are interested.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for the overview. It was great to catch up today.
Awesome, Joe. Thank you so much, and it was great to be on your show, and certainly intriguing topics, and look forward to staying connected.
This podcast is copyright of Sustainable Tech Partner and Mentori Ventures. Music written, performed, and copyright of my son, also named Joe Panettiere.